We are streaming live on Facebook, so I'd like to welcome people there as well as directly into our Zoom call. We're trying to check out the Facebook comments and questions, as well as anything that all of you joining us here on Zoom might like to ask. I'm Shiloh Todorov. I'm the Finance and Fundraising Director for the Matriots PAC, and many of you know my colleague Kim Crowfoot-Swade, who's our Interim Executive Director. And in just a moment, I will formally introduce the reason you're here, the star of the show, Justice Jennifer Brunner, who was a 2020 Matriots endorsed candidate and is now sitting on the Ohio Supreme Court. This is, as all of our conversations are, meant to be just that, a conversation. So I hope that you've come with your questions. I have some of my own. And I know Justice Brunner has a number of fun stories that she's ready to share about campaigning and COVID. So without further ado, we'll dive in. I know I recognize so many of the faces on here. And again, I'm so pleased that we have the whole state represented here today. But we also have a number of people who are joining a Matriots conversation for the first time. So I want to welcome you, and I want to just sort of say, please scroll through and see all of the amazing people in this community. We would love to have you be a part of it as well. The Matriots, you may know, was founded in 2017. We've been in just 3 general elections so far, 18, 19, and 20. We have been in 176 races. That's 161 individual women, because we've been on some people's team twice, and we put up 99 wins. So we're feeling really good about the way that we've come out of the gates. And in 2021, we're hoping to endorse as many as 200 women for everything from township trustee to major city mayors. So we are just about to announce our first class of primary endorsed candidates. That'll come into your inboxes next week if you're a member on Tuesday. So we'll get the ball rolling toward that number of 200 that we hope to have in the class of 2021. All right, so Jennifer Brunner is a newly seated justice on the Ohio Supreme Court. Her lifetime of service is part of the reason we want to talk to her today, but here are just a few of the highlights. She was serving as an elected appellate judge in Columbus before election to the state's highest court. Justice Brunner has experience as a state trial court judge and was elected as the first woman Secretary of State in Ohio. And she, like many of you, is a founding member of the Matriots PAC. The Matriots is proud to have endorsed your election effort and proud to have you as an investor as well, Justice Brunner. Welcome.
Thank you, Shiloh. And thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules to attend today. I've been involved with the Matriots since their formation days, sometimes just giving advice. And I was glad that I could kind of slide in there into that first class as a founding mother. And I see quite a few others, like my former neighbor, Kathy Bowman here. And I know so many of you do so much, not just with the Matriots, but and Judge Bettman's here too. Good. But just really to help move good government forward in Ohio. And it means a tremendous amount. I got a call from an early mentor of mine today, Mary Boyle, who you might remember was one of the first women to run for the US Senate back in the 1990s. And she was a county commissioner in Cuyahoga County. And she also ran for state treasurer. And she was calling to ask me sort of a civic kind of question. And she said, I've got so much work to do. I'm back at it. And I feel personally responsible that I wasn't as involved as I should have been in prior elections where we ended up with people who didn't do well by us. I'm not going to go naming names. And I just was pretty amazed to think that here was someone who I had looked up to even the first time I ran for Secretary of State beginning in 2005, and she's still at it, and she still says there's so much to do and that we have to do. So you're being involved with the Matriots is one way that you can do your part. And I can tell you from the standpoint of being a candidate, then seeing it from its formation all the way to when it was involved in my race, you came in and the organization came in when I needed you. It wasn't just a contribution from your pack. It was the way that you got the word out to other women, the way that you sort of brought women together who were running for office, and we were able to help each other. I really am here more to answer your questions today, to give you some insight into a most unusual 2020 campaign. Shiloh, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, and I wanted to start, and you touched on it a little bit, with a legacy of service. You really represent having a legacy of service. And one of the reasons the Matriots is excited when we think about who the vice president is today, right? Kamala Harris shattered the glass ceiling for women. And part of that is because her backstory includes service at the county level, and then running at the state level, and then running for a different statewide level. You've also served at multiple levels of government. And since part of our story and our reason for being is not just to put elected women into office, but to help them build power and influence and continue to move up ticket, I'd just be curious to have you share a little bit about how each of your positions has informed and prepared you for the next one. How do these things interact?
The first time I ran for elective office was in 2000. There are generally three reasons why women don't run for office. Number one, they're concerned about their family, the well-being of their family. Number two, they think perhaps they haven't gone far enough professionally to move into that elected leadership space. And number three, they were never specifically asked. And in 1992, Fran Ryan, who was the first women chair of the Franklin County Democratic Party, asked me to run for judge. And she asked me to run for a seat that I didn't think I could win. It was running against Dana Deschler, and there was a hotel named Deschler in the history of Columbus. And my kids were still pretty young, and I had been an attorney for about 9 years. And so all those things went through my head. Oh, my kids, I don't think I'm far enough along. But the fact that she asked me, it never left my head. So for the next 8 years, I was thinking, okay, I really do want to run for judge. Where would be a good place to be? So ironically, I had represented Lee Fisher when he ran for governor in 1998, who later on was my opponent for the US Senate in 2010. And once Lee lost that general election for governor, I thought, well, sister, you better not wait around to get appointed. You're going to have to run for something, or you'll be sick in your 60s by the time you can ever serve as a judge. So I was always looking and watching. And then in 2000, somebody left office named O'Grady, and John Bender, a friend of mine, was appointed to his seat. And I thought, this is a seat I have to go for. And I had enough relationships within the party that I was able to go ahead and actually gain the appointment of the party as a nominee, and without even having to circulate petitions, because that's the process if there's a vacancy. And not even my husband thought I was going to win this race. And I remember my good friend John Marshall, who I worked with in Sherrod Brown's office for Secretary of State. We went to lunch and he said, "You really think you're going to win this, don't you?" I said, "Well, yeah, I do." And I just worked harder, and I did raise money, and I think I raised about 75,000. And I got there, and it was like by 2 percentage points. But, once I was there and I decided I wanted to work on a drug court, because we hadn't had anything like that in Franklin County, it taught me the meaning of elected public service, because I was able in the elected position to help with another judge bring people together. And within 2 years, working with a volunteer group of 60 people from around the county, we actually had in operation within a day of each other a drug court and a common pleas court and a mental health court and a municipal court. And then as I saw how it did good for people's lives, it was just like, I get it. I get what public service is all about. And I think no person runs without a little bit of ambition, a little bit of a sense of adventure. And so I ended up leaving the bench to run for Secretary of State in 2006. So I left in 2005, and I had done my due diligence, talked to people, traveled the state. By the time I left the bench, I already had the support. I think I'd already traveled to 30 or 35 counties, never saying that I was running, just saying I was thinking about it. But then it was very easy at that point to gain the support of county political party chairs, so that I was able to clear the primary field. And I was actually the only one on the ballot in the 2006 primary election who had not a single primary opponent, not even just sort of people who slide their name in. And, I also learned, though, that you really have to know yourself, and you have to know why you're running. That's the first question you need to be able to answer. And, I knew that my predecessor had caused a lot of problems, some through negligence, some through just misguidance, in the integrity of Ohio's election process. So I knew, having worked for Sherrod Brown when he was Secretary of State in the early 80s, having practiced election law for 13 years, and having done other things along the way, and especially administrative law, that I would be a good Secretary of State. And so I was able to actually form my message around my qualifications and my experience. And sure enough, sadly enough, I was the first woman elected Secretary of State. And it is mind-blowing because only 5 women have been elected to statewide executive office in their own right since 1803. There's been Gertrude Donahue, first elected in the 80s, or maybe the 70s, I guess, for Ohio Treasurer, then Mary Ellen Withrow, then Betty Montgomery, Attorney General, later Auditor, and then the same year, Mary Taylor and I were elected in 2006, and no woman has been elected statewide to a non-judicial position since that time. You can say, okay, you could be on the ticket as Lieutenant Governor, but you're on the coattails of whoever the gubernatorial candidate is, and that really has to change. So when the Matriots started after the Women's March in 2016, and I had a chance to sit down with its founders, I was like, this is unbelievable. Because I've spent time with women in other states. I've seen their blueprints for how they've started a women's organization in those states. And, the Matriots were smart. They raised money in ways that I hadn't seen women typically raise money before. And then they looked for good political advice, and they made sure that they weren't sort of subsumed by some national group that had other ideas in mind. They face criticism for things that they've done, but they've stuck to their mission. And, I'm frankly pretty thrilled about that. Now, I'll just jump a little bit ahead and then I'll be quiet. So in 2008, I had, by the middle of 2009, this is into my first term and only term as Secretary of State, I had accomplished the 4 goals I set out to accomplish. George Voinovich decided that he was going to retire. And so here was the first time a sitting elected female statewide office holder was in a position to run for the US Senate. And we'd never had a woman senator before. In the past, Mary Boyle had run for US Senate from the seat of County Commissioner, and Bernadine Healy, who was in the private sector, had run as well on the Republican side. But that was it. And so I actually spent 2 hours with the governor at the governor's office saying, I need to know how you feel about this. And he said he did not want to commit because it was his lieutenant governor who also was interested in running. And he kept saying to me, ultimately, I think he won't run. But I didn't say, maybe because I didn't want to know, I said, so if he does run, are you going to endorse him? But I didn't ask that question. And when he said to me, follow your heart, well, I was off. And it was a very, very tough race. I mean, it was probably the toughest US Senate race in the primary in the country. I was threatened by Senator Menendez, that I needed to get out of the race or they'd come into Ohio and work against me. And I looked him in the eye and I said, Senator, if you come to Ohio and work against me, the women of Ohio will never forgive you. And I had promised a group of women that I was on the phone with from around the state. One of them said, promise us you won't drop out. So I did, okay, I won't drop out. And I didn't. And I took a beating. I mean, our finance director's computer was stolen from our campaign office. Fundraisers with printed invitations were shut down. I could go on and on. And so the way that I dealt with it is I bought a school bus on eBay for $2,050 and we snuck it into a warehouse in Marion, Ohio. And our supporters named it the Courage Express. And my staff, once it came out with silver paint, I chose the color so it would look like, those Airstream things. And we were using Rosie the Riveter, of course. So anyways, they stenciled the Courage Express on it. And I remember seeing Sherrod Brown's face the first time he saw the bus. I think he thought, what the heck is that? And it was me. So I, hopped off the bus. And and we fitted it with Wi-Fi, mobile Wi-Fi. We had teams of people on the bus who were cutting turf. We robocalled our volunteers around the state. We did a 6,000-mile tour in 3 weeks. And as we got to each location, we handed out walking lists and call lists because we knew how to do virtual phone banking. And I lost by 10 points, raised about $1 million. My opponent raised over $3 million. And, I was glad the campaign was over because it was pretty rough. But, I think because I stuck it out, other women felt that they could run, people of color, LGBT folks who said, man, if she could do it, I could do it. So, I finished out my term as Secretary of State. We cleaned up everything that had been left still and we even adopted some rules that stopped the effect of Citizens United in Ohio until a few years later. They didn't even pay attention to what we were doing. I was like the nuns in The Sound of Music who helped the Von Trapps get away like this, and so then I went back into private practice, and that was a real awakening because everything was virtual by this time, at least in my old law office that I'd started out of the corner of my bedroom when my kids were 7, 4, and 2. And, I ended up fortunately being able to do public service overseas, first in Serbia, helping with judicial reform and anti-corruption called a government accountability program. They actually had an anti-corruption agency in Belgrade, if you can imagine. Started being able to do election observation in Egypt, and then ultimately taught at the Bar Association in Sri Lanka. But, then the time came when I thought maybe it's time for me to get back in. Again, my motivation was I've always wanted to be on the Court of Appeals, but the governor's going to appoint someone to replace Judy French, who I just ran against last fall, who doesn't have any judicial experience. And this is too important of a court because it handles the administrative cases that come out of state government for the state of Ohio. So I was at breakfast with the county chair and I said, I had to run for that. And being a very good county chair, he immediately said, would you? And I said, yeah, maybe I think I will. And so I was able to win that race. And then in 2016 was unopposed for re-election. And then David Pepper, the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party at the time, asked me to run for the Supreme Court in 2016. I said no. 2018, I said no. In 2020, the reason I said yes was because of reapportionment and redistricting. Because I knew that even if we just had one person on that court, it would make a difference and it would allow Ohio to get out of the garbage can that we've been in politics for most of my adult life. And because I don't care, I don't care about moving forward the agenda of one party or another. I just care about it being fair and about it creating a government that actually serves its people and more abundantly reflects its people.
So let's dive into that if we can, Justice Brunner, because I have the privilege of spending most of my day talking to our members across the state, right? And as I have made contact with people, especially since November 3rd, I hear your name a lot. And that is one of the reasons that people got really excited about having you on the court, is the potential ahead of us as it relates to the redistricting that we're just about to undertake. So go on a deeper dive there. What are you expecting? Why was that important to why you said yes to run?
Well, the Supreme Court does not draw the district lines, but it holds the legislature accountable when they do. Now, what's a little bit up in the air right now is the U.S. Census Bureau is saying we're not going to get you your data, which you need the census blocks to redraw the district lines, because you've got to see where the population changes have occurred over the last 10 years in the new census. So I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the legislative process and how it melds with the time deadlines in the new constitutional provisions that exist now for the purpose of eliminating gerrymandering in Ohio. So that remains to be seen. And because I sit on the court and would have the potential of reviewing any plan that would come before us, there's a limit to what I could say, except that I'm going to be fair and impartial in whatever review that might come before the court.
Yeah, great. So I'll tell you that here's my next question. This is the other thing that I heard all the time when me and members were talking about your win, right? Many of us saw your literature or your billboards as a ticket, right? You were running with another member of your party for the court, and you were the one on the ticket who was successful. So tell us a little bit about how you campaigned in COVID, obviously from the school bus. You are a creative campaigner, but everything kind of went sideways in COVID, right? So talk to us about, I know we've got a bunch of people on this call that are in the middle of their own campaigns right now or thinking about one. So give us some advice.
So, first of all, as a baseline, I had a healthy social media presence, because when I ran for the Senate in 2010, I had to get on Twitter, I had to get on Facebook, and then eventually I got on Instagram just so I could keep up with my nieces and nephews, because I knew if I looked at their faces, I'd know if they were okay without seeing any words at all. And then in 2014, I invested the time to be involved in LinkedIn, and I really enjoy that one too. And so I just kept it going because I enjoyed sort of being in touch with people that way. So we started off with a very small staff. My campaign manager, Andrew DiCarlo, had been the finance director at the Ohio Democratic Party. He wanted the experience to manage a statewide campaign. I was getting someone who had the same fundraising philosophy I had, which was not to get in people's faces, not to be overly aggressive, but to make people comfortable and to be detailed and to follow up, which are the two keys to being a good fundraiser. And so eventually, earlier than a lot of other campaigns would, once we were in COVID, we added a field director, but we ran our campaign with just those two staff people, lean and mean, like you would a business, a small business. You want to keep your fixed overhead low, and because once you got that fixed overhead, you're stuck with it. And really, as we were going into COVID, we were just getting ready to hire a couple of firms to do fundraising for us, but fortunately we had not signed for anything because my model was going to be just to do a variety of fundraisers all over the state. In fact, at the time that we went into COVID, I had 40 fundraisers already lined up with the goal of holding 100. And the reason that fundraisers are great if you're doing an in-person campaign is the outreach that goes into it along with the fundraising. While it's easy to get on the phone, and you still have to some degree, especially for a non-judicial campaign, those fundraisers bring people together and provide you with other opportunities for more fundraising, for more outreach, and to create a good impression where, because I like to say, if somebody gives a contribution to you, you're likely to pick up 4 to 5 votes just from that contribution. So you like the big contributions, but to me, it's much, much better to get a whole lot of small contributions, because that's more votes and that's how you win. I mean, if it's a 2-person race, it's 50% plus 1. So once we went into the pandemic, I realized early on, this is not going to be a short-term thing. And I think, some people did, some people took longer to come to the realization. And I said, Andrew, look, I said, we got to turn this campaign completely digital. And I've done this before in a Senate campaign when I had to go from typical Emily's List to grassroots guerrilla style campaign. And I said, it's going to take 90 days. And it did. And so I moved up to my farmhouse in Northeast Ohio in rural Columbiana County, more Trump signs than you have ever seen in your life. And I will tell you, it's the worst possible internet I could have had, 25 megabytes per second, 3 megabytes download speed. And so most of my campaign was done on my little iPhone 8. I sat my laptop on a pile of books. I set my iPhone up on my laptop and I worked directly through that. Even when I did the debate with the Ohio Debate Commission, they made me turn my phone sideways. So, when you turn your phone sideways, your little camera's like right about here. And so I had to look at that hole the whole time and not look at anything else the entire time I was debating. And nobody knew how difficult that was. but determination will get you pretty far. And so I campaigned up and down the ballot with other judicial candidates, and I spent the time to identify who those candidates were. There have been times in every campaign I've had where I have this idea in my head, like, we need to campaign with other candidates. And they're always like, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. And do they ever do anything about it? No. So Jennifer sits down, she looks at all the results of the elections, she goes through, she finds candidates, she sees who she wants to campaign with, and I say, here's my list, let's start making calls. I mean, even when it came to targeting for this election, I personally spent 2 days going through the list and seeing where I did better than the other 3 statewide judicial candidates that I was in the same race with. Were 2 different, at the statewide level. I looked to see how I did. So in counties where I got more votes in the primary than my opponent did, I said, okay, that county is a win for me, because the independents may break about half and half. It depends. Because if you start looking at these counties, there's maybe, if you're lucky, there's 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, and really close to half, it may be like less than 1/3, close to half is unaffiliated by party. I can't tell whether that's because of a change in how the reporting goes on since the primary elections. But when you think about that, I said, okay, so I actually literally color coded my map and said, these are my base counties. These are counties I think I can flip. These are counties where if I could just get to 50%, I'm okay. And these are counties where I'll just try to do a little bit better. And then once we went into digital advertising, because we had a plan to do digital advertising, where literally we made videos and we pushed those out on the internet. I was able to give that map to my digital people and say, here's what we want to do. And by golly, we flipped Delaware County, we flipped Ashtabula County, 2 big ones on my list. We flipped a lot of counties I didn't think we were going to flip. And as far as running with other candidates, I was trying to do what we're doing now, which was to do a Zoom interview of a candidate for a Friday lunch Facebook Live, which I was doing. But my internet was so bad that we never could actually flip it over to Facebook Live. And it was, I mean, I'm telling you, I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. And then, so finally, after 2 failures, I didn't want to have a 3rd time as the charm or anything that would be worse than what I already had. So we just decided to pre-record these and then push these out and move them around on joint social media. So, because a judge is allowed to co-campaign with other candidates without endorsing them. And so essentially we were just amplifying on the internet the sound. And fundraising was slow the first 3 months, even 4 or 5 months into the campaign. But once we got closer to September, where people were sort of used to life in the pandemic and they knew where their financial situation stood, then we started getting some more contributions again. And then so by September, I was then able to hire a fundraiser, and we were actually able to raise some money. And all told, which shocks me, in the pandemic, we raised over $1 million. Some of that was from the Ohio Democratic Party. But again, if the Ohio Democratic Party put me on a call with nationwide donors, that money went to the judicial fund, and then some of it then came to my campaign and John O'Donnell's campaign. I have to say that my philosophy in a campaign, as compared to what I've seen other people do, is any chance you get to meet with people, you take it. Any chance you get to actually get some kind of media coverage that you don't have to pay for, you definitely take it. And so it's kind of like when you plant grass seed, at some point in time, it just starts to come together. And one day it was splotchy, and the next day it's sort of like light green and solid. And that's how you get going in the campaign. And so you blend your fundraising with your outreach, with your grassroots work. And before you know it, you have created one heck of a campaign that maybe in the beginning seemed a little like smoke and mirrors. And the reason I brought the field director in early was because I knew, especially in a pandemic, the value of volunteers. You cannot disappoint your volunteers. You have to let your volunteers see that you are organized, that you have your campaign together, and that if they're going to spend their time with you, it's going to be meaningful and it's going to be good for them. And so I found a person who was very detail oriented And sometimes I mean, as crazy as this sounds, if someone wrote into the website, I got the email, the campaign manager got the email, and so did the field director. And so every once in a while, I would just respond to the emails just to see if everybody was following up like they should. Because look, if any of you run a business, the main difference between a campaign and a business is that you're doing your timeline backwards because you're eventually going to shut that business down at the end of your time. And so your campaign is the marketing of the product that you have to sell, which is basically you. And so you pull yourself out of like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. This is me. You just pretend that you're a mannequin over there in the corner. And how do you sell that mannequin over there? And you know that you can write in a third person voice, and you're not being immodest. You're just doing a good job.
I think, yeah, I think between your spotty Wi-Fi, you're writing for yourself, right? I think you shared with me that you were also your own graphic designer, and there was an exercise ball in there somewhere, right? Like,
okay, so I've taken up painting with wax and caustic, and it's like collage painting kind of thing. I finally got a chance to do it because I wanted to be an art major and I never got a chance to be. So of course you know, and I do play a little game where you design rooms. So when I need to get that artistic, you know, focus out, I can do that if I don't have time to paint. So I was able to do my own graphic designing on Canva. So I designed all my literature, all my signs, yard sign, you know, graphics for each interview I did, and a little bit crazy. And I finally got a young volunteer who was from Fairview, Ohio, but doing Teach for America in Texas to spot me on some of it. So I was getting volunteer help from Texas at the same time. But yeah, so that saved money, but it also meant that my campaign had the look and feel that I wanted it to have. And I was getting the art part out of my system at the same time. So then, you know, I don't know about you, but you get to be a certain age and your lower back just isn't so good. So I had an exercise ball that was in a frame. And so I would sit on the exercise ball, and sometimes just to like for levity with my Court of Appeals judges, I would just move around like this on it to say, hey, look, it's a virtual background. But actually, it made me sit up taller, and it saved my back at the same time. So nobody knew when I was doing the debate, I was actually sitting on an exercise ball. That's the beauty of campaigning in COVID.
mm-hmm.
But you know, you do what you have to do. If you can laugh at yourself, it's even better. And you know, I did feel though that campaigning during COVID was like campaigning from a spaceship, because when you campaign, especially in a statewide campaign, you're leaving the house at 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and you may not get home till 11 o'clock at night. And you're doing this sometimes 6 days a week, maybe sometimes even 7 toward the end of the campaign. And the only thing that gets you through it is the energy that you draw from people when you get to spend time and be in their presence. And it was very tedious to always just be in front of a screen. And, you know, when you get these messages on your phone on a Sunday that say, oh, your screen time is down this week, it's only an average of 8.30, you know, 8 hours and 34 minutes, or, you know, you're like, oh, no wonder my eyes hurt so much.
Yeah.
But, you know, but the thing about a campaign, and for those of you who may be campaigning, it's going to be over. So you can do what you need to do for the time that you have to do it. And you hope for the best. And I guess we got toward the end of the campaign, and I said, Andrew, I think that we're doing well. I sense that we're doing well, but I do not want to leave one stone unturned. I don't want this campaign to be over and to think we could have done this. So I said, I need 2,000 signs. He said, what? I said, we got to get 2,000 signs. We got to find a way to get them to outside the flags at polling locations on election day. And Antoinette Wilson, who is a wonderful campaign consultant for me and who did my commercials for me, she said, I'll find a way to get you the signs. And it cost $5,000, but this time I put Democrat on the signs, and we got those to early voting location, or we got them beyond the early voting locations. We got them to polling places on election day. And, you know, when I was watching the results come in election night, I knew that I would be strong on early voting. So it was like maybe 20 points up. And then I knew that as the in-person voting for election day came in, it would start to go like this. And I watched John O'Donnell's go like this, and Sharon Kennedy got ahead of him. And I watched mine go like this, and they just bounced and they stayed. And I, you know, I thought I was going to win, but I didn't think I was going to win that well. And so it's, I guess if you're a candidate, you know, and you've got some common sense things, and you know people, and you know yourself, listen to yourself. Don't rationalize your way out of doing the hard things that you have to do, but use your common sense and listen to yourself, and listen to other people, and have confidence in yourself that the advice they give you, you can judge whether it's good or not, or whether it's going to work for you or not, and then go from there. There's a lot of concentric circles theories. I can get into those, but Shiloh, I know you've got other questions.
Well, I want to pull one out of the chat here, and also encourage anyone else who has a question for Justice Brunner to type it into the chat. Mary B is applauding your support for mental health courts, and I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, specialized dockets are, Ohio's actually a pretty decent national leader in specialized dockets. I started the felony drug court in 2004. And before that, I was inspired by Judge Eleanor Marsh Stormer out of Summit County, who had started the first mental health court in the municipal court she was presiding over in Summit County. And this was the first one in the state of Ohio. So specialized dockets allow the court to actually look at some of the reasons why a person ends up in the criminal justice system. And because that person committed a crime, they're able to actually, once a person says, yes, I'll join the program, they're actually in a better position to sort of make stick some of the treatment options that could help that person improve the situation that landed them where they are, and give them some sort of, I would say, you know, circle support. I mean, and I mean, frankly, with these specialized dockets, if the person doesn't do what they're supposed to do, the judge can put them in jail. And it's, believe me, when you're presiding over a specialized docket, you get to know your folks, and it hurts the judge as much as it hurts the person when you have to put them in jail. But it's a therapeutic court, and it's designed to reduce recidivism. And it's not successful every time, but many times, if you can get the person at the point in their life where they're ready to make a change, and they're ready to turn the corner, this is sort of the safety net that'll actually help them succeed.
Okay. A question from Burl, who is herself a Matriots endorsed elected. Hello. What do you think about the legislation currently being debated that would add party designation to statewide judicial races, but not local judicial races?
Well, after this election, there are now a majority Democrats in the courts of appeals. And now the Ohio Supreme Court is 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. But I don't think it's the same political party ratio for the trial court. So I think there may be a little bit of gamesmanship there. But you know, every time that I have seen a party try to sort of rig the system, and you know, the male thing is to call it the playing field. I call it, I sometimes like to think of it in terms of theater, and stand. I would call my alternate jurors not, you know, you're on the bench. I'd say you're the backup artist, you know. But anyways, it's when I see this happen, it generally backfires on them, because the electorate changes. And if you look at the electorate, first of all, the Pew Hispanic Project, at least 10 years ago, said that by 2050, the major minority group in this country will be Hispanics and not African Americans, and that Caucasians will be less than 50% by that time. When you look at who voted for Barack Obama in 2008, and you look at the young people coming up, I'm not sure that it's going to serve the Republican Party, at least the way that it's positioned itself right now as the party of Trump, to have that party affiliation on the ballot. But if they want to do it, it's their choice. I think I could still win a race with a Democrat next to my name. But I think the sad thing is what it will do to lower the public's belief in the objectivity and the integrity of the judiciary. And we don't need to be in a Roman Colosseum with one side or the other. That's not the way the judiciary operates. We're there as that third branch of government. We hold them accountable as much as they hold us accountable. And we have limits as to what we can do that aren't within our jurisdiction, but we do have the greatest amount of discretion, which is why judges are held to a higher level of integrity. And we don't need to be doing anything to lower the public's confidence in that branch of government.
Yeah. Colleen, as a follow-up question then to that, why do you think there are so many Democrats in Ohio's judicial system when we have a majority GOP in the legislatures and the county governments?
I don't want to favor one party over another. I just think that in the larger, when I ran the first time in 2000 in Franklin County, I was the 5th Democrat elected in a 16-judge general division court. I was the 5th woman on the court at the time. At the time, Hamilton County was extremely red still. Probably my coming in 2000 was the sort of the crest of the blue wave starting to wash over Franklin County. Many times demographically, you have, as the cities get larger, some of the people who may be more conservative politically tend to move outside that county into some of the more rural counties, the surrounding counties. And so I think that's what's caused, for instance, Franklin County to go from red to blue in the last 20 years, and the same with Hamilton County. And so I think that has accounted, and you look in terms of judges are apportioned by population. So you start to look at places that the 3 major counties in Ohio, population wise, that's a lot of judges. So that, and then when those judges get elected, they're the bench for the appellate judges and then for the Supreme Court justices, ideally.
Yeah, yeah. Richard is teeing up a question about how to campaign. His example is in Hamilton County, we organized a strong coordinated judicial campaign, slate cards with all the Democratic judges listed with their photos. What do you think about that approach?
That's what we did in 2014. We had, it used to be, I will tell you, I was never a participant in this, but I always understood that this happened, that sometimes the parties would get together and cut deals. We won't run anybody against your candidate if you don't run anybody against ours. And a party will do that when they think that they need to hold on to what they have, and they're worried that they might lose what they have. And so, as the last 20 years have evolved, that kind of thing has diminished. And so when 2014, the Democratic Party in Franklin County ran an entire slate of candidates, and we had our own slate card, and we actually had enough for a baseball team. So, we had to do the sports thing again. But I did do, to try to help the ticket, I did do a billboard that said, something about a good judge. A good judge hits it out of the park, even from the bench. So I was trying to keep that baseball thing going, for the rest of the ticket. And we had a girl baseball player in it too, which was great. But I think it's very valuable because there's if you think about what happens when a group of people come together, there's sometimes the result is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what can happen when you bring a ticket together, where there's sort of this synchronicity that can happen, and where people are just saying, hey, if I've got 8 people to hand out one piece of literature, it's going to get to a lot more people than just one person handing out my one piece of literature.
Yeah. Here's another question that I take that you can help us sort out. And we've been talking a lot to the candidates and campaigners on the call, right? This would be more on I think the regular member side. I find it difficult to figure out how to vote for judges. Can you give us some advice about how to be good and prepared voters for different levels of judicial races? That seems to be sort of a black box for a lot of people.
The League of Women Voters, and I think even the Ohio Supreme Court, have candidate guides. And when somebody's running for office, there are a ton of questionnaires you have to fill out as the candidate, and it takes a lot of time. And you just can't do a cookie cutter that works for everything. You really have to put some thought into it. And so the more that candidates will take advantage of that, the greater the service it is to the voters, but also it helps the candidate so that people can understand who they are and what they're about. They also should be personally involved in their social media, because there will be times when people send in a question and they are the only person who can answer it. And there were many times people would ask me a question about where I stood on this or that issue, even when I was running for judge, and I could, tell them what the limitations were on what I had, what I could say, but I could also point to what I had done if they wanted to look into it further. And for those of you running for a non-judicial office, I can't tell you how important it is that you have a stance on a variety of issues, that people can find it on your website, and that because the better your website is, the more together they think that you are, and actually the more competent you look as a candidate, which means the more competent they're going to think you'll be as an elected official. That campaign is your test run for how you're going to do in office. I have never been appointed to an elected position ever. I've always had to run for it, and I am not sorry about that, because the entire time I was running, I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to be in this position if I win. How am I going to conduct myself? What are the issues I'm going to have to think about? And as I campaigned and I met people and I saw saw where they lived, I saw their points, listened to their points of view, it helped me become a better office holder because I had to actually run for the office.
Yeah, great. I want to return to the idea of running as a woman and some of the hurdles that you have defined for us earlier in the conversation, right? Some of the ways that you had to campaign differently or even just fight to get on a ballot in the first place, right? And maybe this we're at 5:20, so this may be the last question, but according to Matriots research, just 29% of Ohio's elected positions are held by women. And our goal in just the next 7 years is to get to 50%. So how are we going to remove those hurdles that you have faced for other women? How do we work together to actually get more women running and get more women elected?
We ask more women to run, and then we support them with, look, I like to say there are mentors and there are sponsors. And a sponsor opens the door for you. A mentor walks through that door with you. And we need both. And sometimes we may need unofficially for ourselves a little kitchen cabinet that we can call and say, hey, what do you think about this? And you might not want to run it just by one person. Might want to run it by 2 or 3 people, but ultimately you have to know yourself and know what you're comfortable with and how you best present yourself. Back when I first started running, it was very important for a woman to be well put together. The first time I ran statewide, it was still the Hillary pantsuit. And, I had to go to DC. I had to ask for money in DC. And so I had a uniform. I had pearls. I had every color of pearls except green and blue, I think. And I had a suit that had to match and be well fitting, because I knew that it didn't matter whether it was men or women in that audience. They were going to look me up and down, and they weren't going to listen to what I had to say until they thought I was well put together. Now, then I got to tell you, at the end of my 2010 term as Secretary of State, I was getting a little older, and I found a book called How Not to Look Old. And so I knew like the suit was too matchy. And, I kind of will never forgive Michelle Obama for the bare arms, because I just could not do that with the dresses. But, I still try to look professional in a way that I'm not going to detract from my appearance. I think for women, if you can be self-deprecating and able to laugh at yourself, for some men who may be uncomfortable with you or may not be willing to accept you, the fact that you have a sense of humor sort of breaks down that barrier. But again, if you work hard and you're kind and you always look to find a way, people sure admire that. And I just saw some fantastic candidates of all kinds of diversity in 2020. And I have a lot of hope for seeing a broader spectrum of people in elective office than we've ever seen before. And I thank you all for having that same interest. I know you do.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've seen, the political lifestyle getting better for women since you first got in? Are we going in the right direction? Are there benchmarks you could note?
I've told women who are running, I knew I couldn't really run until my kids were a little bit older. It just didn't work for me. So my youngest was 14 and I ran. Now I did have 3 foster kids at the time, so it was a lot of help in parades. But that campaigning actually that time, that was a countywide race. It was like time to myself actually. And then the kids left like right after the time I started in office, which was heart-wrenching. But that's the way that it went in the process. They wanted to go back to their parents. But I didn't run statewide till my youngest was out of high school. Now, my husband said to me, don't you even think about running statewide until he's out of high school. So he graduated in June of 04, and in July of 04, I decided to run. So
Promise kept.
Yes. Yes. So I think, it has to, for everybody, it has to work in their life. And I see women amazingly doing this with younger children. And frankly, more power to them, because when we get more women in office, the childcare situation will get better. The elder care situation will get better. Workplace flexibility will be better. The pandemic will probably move that along a little bit. And quite frankly, women's healthcare is going to move forward too. And it's only going to happen when people with that experience are there sitting at the table in a position of power to help make those decisions.
Amen. I couldn't have ended on a better note than that. Thank you, Justice Brunner. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being a Matriots endorsed candidate and one of our contributors. Thanks for spending an hour with us.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I want to leave with 2 thoughts, 2 things, 2 to-dos for this great crowd that you've drawn here for us. One, if we're going to get to 200 endorsements, as we intend to this year, we need a lot of applications to come in the door at the Matriots in 2021. Our next application deadline is June 1st, and we no longer have a population cap. So villages, townships, smaller cities, please spread the word. We want to see those applications from women who share our values. So I'm going to put the how to apply in the chat. If you are not already a member, I'm also going to put the join link, because we need you on our team in order to continue to put more women in office, part by helping them finance their campaigns. That's what we're all about. Thank you all for spending an hour with us. And if you're interested in redistricting, join us again next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. We'd love to see you then. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.